your fellow people in basic training, then your pilot cadets, and then when you went in radio school and gunnery school, what were the backgrounds of people you interacted with?
All backgrounds. It was very, very mixed backgrounds. One guy's a cowboy, another guy was a drugstore clerk, and it was all varied backgrounds. A lot of them were students like myself. Young guys just got out of high school, and some were college guys. All different. I had a guy that was in gunnery school with me. He had 2,200 hours on a Catalina flying boat. He had a hell of a time talking the Army into, the Army did, I don't know why, but he flew up in Alaska for a civilian outfit. And he finally got into, and I think he got into the ATC, as they call it, Army Transport Command in those days. But you had all varied backgrounds. You had guys that were roustabouts and steel puddlers, and varied backgrounds.
Which sounds like it was part of the appeal of
yeah. We had one fellow that was in there, I can remember him. He was a very, very reserved, refined individual. And he come from a very wealthy family in Massachusetts. And he was studying to be a concert pianist. And he'd go into the rec hall after hours and be playing, concert-style music. And one of the guys, I just stopped playing this. And he said, oh, you mean rather have this? And then he started boogie-woogie. That guy could play that piano. Man, he could play boogie-woogie. In those days, he was I can always remember him. And I think he was killed. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But as I said, it was just along the trail. And once you get out of all the training schools, then, of course, you're all split up into different crews. Sometimes you may go together, sometimes. But my crew was composed of a lot of guys. They had 55, I think it was, crews to fill out a complement in Pueblo, Colorado, and they needed 56. And my pilot, I was very lucky. He had already a tour. He had flown overseas. He was going back, and my co-pilot was an instructor pilot. And I don't know, he got in trouble or something, but he was one hell of a pilot. And
so you had a very experienced pilot and co-pilot.
Oh yeah. We were very, and my tail gunner had flown a previous tour in B-25s, so we were damn. I was the baby, myself and Tufford. He was a ball turret gunner. He was a young guy like me. But the other guys, the flight engineer was experienced. I guess a waist gunner. He just came out of gunnery school. But we were very fortunate because that means an awful lot over there. When we reported, we arrived at our ultimate destination overseas. As you know, all the experienced crews go up there and they start telling you war stories and everything else. And when Jonesy took his coat off, I think he had 3 Purple Hearts and all the garbage there. The guys like that, he let him along for a while, and then he took his coat. It was funny, but no, we were very fortunate in having an experience. I felt very fortunate.
I mean, the two guys, having a gunner and a pilot who had done tours. What had prompted them to do another tour?
They probably got bored. Jonesy was a cowboy from Texas. And he used to tell a story that the reason he joined up is because the sheriff was after him for knocking up the sheriff's daughter. That's why he joined the Air Force. I don't know how true that was. He was quite a guy, and he was the kind of guy that craved excitement.
He really enjoyed this.
I would, if you can enjoy something like that. Yeah,
I mean, he really.
I would think so. He was a guy that was footloose and fancy free, to use an old-fashioned phrase, and I think he probably did enjoy it.
Yeah.
He, as I said, when we finished up, he had a total of 5 Purple Hearts. He had 3 before he already got 2 with us, and but he obviously had to enjoy it, because it's no fun getting not hit. I mean, that's something that you do on a volunteer basis. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But he did enjoy that. He was a funny guy in this respect. He was one of the best guys I ever known in the construction of model airplanes. And we were over there. He had a kit shipped over to him. He built the gasoline model. And we used to have the colonels and the generals down at the other end of the field helping Jonesy, always giving him advice on how to fly. And he said, "Nah, you don't know what you're doing." He'd tell him. He wouldn't give it to him. He wouldn't give it to him. He wasn't nasty, but, he was just, I don't know how to describe the fella. He just had an attitude that everyone liked Jonesy. The CO they never said sergeant. He was always Jonesy. Is Jonesy going to fly his plane today, or this and that? So he was just as I said, but he was one hell of a good guy. He could probably hit a dime and give you a nickel change with that machine gun. He was good, better than me, that's for sure.
It sounds like you had a lot of confidence in him.
Yes, we had a lot of confidence in the whole crew. We had our bombardier was very good. He was so good that we started to fly together with the pilot experience. He used to fly lead a lot,
which is also one of the more. I mean, you really are responsible for the whole.
Oh yeah. They used to have because they drop on the lead plane. Yeah. It wouldn't be not like some people have the impression that each individual aimed to bomb themselves. They always dropped on the lead plane, and then, of course I was a lead radio operator being on the lead plane because of them, not because of me. And he was, as I said, with the pilot's experience. And he was one. Our pilot was extremely experienced. He was a lousy instrument pilot. But we had to fly instruments. We let Nobby do it, the co-pilot, because he was one hell of an instrument. So they complemented each other. But Pappy, as we called him, he used to be able to fly. He'd fly formation. And when we first went over there, of course, we were not an inexperienced crew. And when we first started flying as a crew, because when you first go over there, they split you all up, the so-called skill positions that you have: pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, me and the bombardier and the navigator. They'd fly with experienced crews for a few missions again. But anyway, when we start flying as a crew, and you'd fly formation, you'd have the wing of the plane and the tail section, and he'd stick that. I'll tell you, he wouldn't be 5-10 feet away. And I go, "Get that goddamn wing out of here!" But he could fly like a rocket. It wouldn't. The only thing, of course, turbulence. He'd be affected by turbulence, but he was a hell of a pilot. I thought he was excellent.
It sounds like you had a very close crew. I mean, crews were generally very close, but your crew sounded.
Yeah, we were close. We were close together. Yeah.
Did you go on leave together, or?
Sometimes. We were close knit crew, but we each had our own thing to do too. I mean, we weren't close 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. We each had our own thing to do, and sometimes you'd go with this guy, or you go with that guy, or you go by yourself, or some of the other guys from the. But we were very close in the air. I mean, we were one cohesive unit.
Mm-hmm. You met as a crew though in New Mexico, and did your.
No, Colorado.
Colorado, excuse me. Yeah, I always think Pueblos in New Mexico. I don't know why, but how long was your shakedown in the United States?
A couple of months, I believe. We used to take off and you practice formation flying, and then you take off on solo hops, and you'd bomb this railroad yard. You may bomb a railroad yard in El Paso or somewhere up in the upper reaches, and Crazy Jonesy one time dropped a 50 caliber block out to see if he could hit something. He was nuts. Thank God no one was hurt.
I mean, it was a live.
No, it was the block from the machine gun, the firing block. He had taken it out. He was a unique. You'll put it that way. He's probably. We probably went home and he got hung or something.
This was the
tail gunner. Yeah. He was a very unique guy.
What was the background? You mentioned Jonesy, the gunner, was from Texas, who allegedly. Yeah. What about the pilots?
Pilot was from New York.
Both of them.
One was from New York City, and one was from Upper New York State. The bombardier was from Wisconsin. I think the navigator. Our regular navigator became ill, and just before we shipped over, had appendicitis, so he didn't go over with us. We had a substitute, and I think he was from Michigan. The flight engineer was from South Carolina. Tufford was from the ball turret gunner. I think he was also from Michigan. One of the other guys was from Utah. I was from Jersey. Trying to think where the other guys were from, but they were from mostly mixture. I mean, they weren't like you would find in the infantry to have a Jersey regiment or Pennsylvania regiment. Where the guys were. They were from all over the country.
You were a very diverse crew.
Yes, we were, and we were diverse in backgrounds and everything else. So much so.
Did any of them have college on the crew? Had any gone to college at all?
The pilot and the bombardier. Bombardier was a pretty good basketball player. We used to play a lot of basketball together. But I think they were the only two. Maybe the navigator.
So you were young. You were young. The crews were generally young, but it sounds like you were a very young crew.
Yeah, I was myself and the ball-turret gunner and the waist gunner were probably young. I just about starting to shave, I guess.
How old was Pappy? Your old.
I think he was in his late 20s. I mean. Anything over 20 in these days was Pappy. I mean, what the hell, that old guy. How times have changed.
You'd mentioned earlier that in between missions, you would play a lot of cards.
Cards? Well, we did play cards. We shot crap. We played ball. You do everything. And then, of course, you did still go to school, and then you'd have training missions. Mm-hmm. And we used to fly up along the Adriatic coast. And they had a target range set out on the ground, made out of some kind of brick or something, and you'd fire your machine gun at that. I don't know what the hell good that would do as far as air-to-air combat, but I can remember one day we were flying up there, we saw this Italian fishing boat, and we buzzed it, and the prop wash flipped it. Man, we heard about that, but no one knew who did it. And Crazy Jonesy, one time we were coming back from a mission. I don't know what got into. He just had these fits, and he saw this Italian car or something. They had gas, or I don't know, it was a civilian vehicle. He says, "I bet you I could put a 50 caliber about 20 feet behind him." Ah, you're crazy, Jonesy. You couldn't. Of course, you egg him on. You want to see that car? He was great. He could have hurt the people. I mean, we were stupid, really stupid things you do. You don't think I was stupid, really. But he was just like that. You never know what he's going to do next.
Well, one of the things a lot of people who've been on air crews have told me is that one of the things, although it was against regulation, they did was the pilots often trained some other crew members on rudimentary ways of flying.
Oh yes, I often had the controls, and they'd be back shooting a machine gun.
So that you could really be interchangeable if
well, in a pinch, yeah. I'd probably get lost, but no, you could handle aircraft. Most of them, that wasn't required. I mean, it wasn't regulation.
No, in fact,
it's against regulation.
Yeah, no,
because
but
there used to be myself and the flight engineer used to do most of it.
But it's also striking, making a lot of sense, because let's say the pilot was killed and someone, that way you could at least crash land the plane.
Oh, sure. I can remember that occurring to other crews, not to us, but not to our crew, but to other crews that the guy flew it back. One of the crewmen flew it back.
So that it even came in, people actually did use it occasionally.
Oh, yeah. I can remember we had making a forced landing at a B-17 base, and we were this B-17 come in, and they had a USO show going on at the same time. And this guy come in and noisy and erratic. You could tell. Even to this day, you can tell from the sound of an aircraft what kind of plane it is. The other day, I was out cutting lawn and I could hear this, and I said, "Oh, that can't be." I look up, there's B-17 flying over. I mean, but you can tell. But anyway, this 17 came in, and there was a 9 or 10 man crew, and there was only one guy that wasn't hit. They had to put that off the record.
Yeah. So 9 of the crew had been hit.
Yeah. And this guy, I don't know whether he was what position he was, but he was an enlisted man, flew the plane back, and he was very fortunate. So it does happen. I mean, that's not an isolated case. It happened quite often.
The word enlisted men or the non-pilot would be the one that broke.
But the hell, you're going to go up there whether you've ever tried or not. You're going to try to get back because that'd be your fanny if you don't. So it did happen. It never happened in our crew.
But you mentioned that your gunner got two more Purple Hearts.
Yeah.
Was he the only member of the crew who ever was injured?
No, I think the bombardier and navigator. I was never hit.
The cases where people were hit, what happened to them, and how serious it was?
Well, fortunately, none of ours were quite. It's humorous in a way. Jonesy, we used to have flak helmets, like the pot, and you were supposed to wear them when you get into an area of the. Most of us put them on. We had flak suits which weighed a ton, but Jonesy, he wears. And we were going after a target. What the hell was it? I don't know. What was it? I think it was probably Vienna, because they had. I think they said they had 1,200 flak guns over there. They found after the war. They had to. You've heard the expression "get out and walk on it." Well, that's type of right. And we heard back there, son of a bitch. And I'm hit. So I went back to him, because I wasn't at a gun position that day. We were flying lead. And there's Jonesy, and the blood was pouring down his face. I thought he was going to die. But it just creased the top of his head, and because he wouldn't wear his helmet. And when you get a head wound, it bleeds quite a bit. And the only thing, then he started to get a little, he's groggy, and he like that, and he says, those sons of bitches there, and he says, look what they did to my head. I don't know if you ever heard of wing cigarettes. That's what they used to give you over there. Oh God, I didn't smoke, but it was a god awful thing. And he used to smoke, and there was blood all over it. And he was cursing at the Germans for messing up his cigarettes. And the only thing, so we ascertained that he wasn't hit that bad. So we had these big bandages, big huge things. So we put it over there. This one was pink, and we tied a big pink bow under his head. And when we landed, he was still in the turret. He became all right, but we wouldn't let him take the thing off. And I can remember one black fellow was working on the edge of the field, and he looked up at Jonesy, and Jonesy's face was still a mask of blood. And that guy, his eyes just turned white. And we were laughing and Jonesy was swearing, because he was a little guy. We wouldn't let him do anything. We were holding him down, make him wear that thing, And man, he never heard the end of that. The pink bow kid. But he was fortunate, just went across the top of his head.
Which, if he'd had the helmet on, he's actually very lucky too.
Yes, he was. As I said, he was born to hang. We were flying one time, and the oxygen mask froze to his face, and he pulled it off and took the skin off with it. And there was a guy that was born to hang. If you pardon the expression, he was just you know people like that yourself. I mean, they get into scrapes and do this and do that, but somehow they muddle through. And he was just that type of an individual.
How scary was your first mission? I mean, you've done a lot of training and.
Well, I'll give you an example. I don't know if you ever heard the expression, put a laundry mark on your undies. That's you shit scared, in other words. I was scared. Anyone that says they're not scared is either a damn fool or... because we were flying after... it was so-called milk run, supposedly. We went into Yugoslavia, and we were going after... They had a small refinery there. And I was flying, as I said, this was when you're flying with another crew, not your regular crew. And I was manning the waist gun. And you look out, and although they brief you and tell you about what's going to happen as with flak is concerned, and they tell you you're going to be mesmerized, you laugh at them until it happens. And it's the truth. You stare, and you just can't comprehend that little piece of black smoke can blow you the hell out of the sky. And I was the same way. And as I said, I was flying a waist gun, and I looked out the window, and I see this plane next to me start to roll in. They got hit. And then I try to crawl into my helmet. And then the realization hit you. Because as you said, we were very, well, I keep using the word naive, but we were. We were very naive. And then you were, I don't know, you were probably more apprehensive when you first started off on your first mission. Until you see something like that, and then you became damn scared.
Because you'd seen accidents back in the States.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Did you? One of the questions I've been trying to get at is like, did your training really prepare for it, or could your training have prepared you for combat?
I would say probably for the mechanics of operation of your equipment, your guns, somewhat. to a lesser extent with the guns. But mentally, you're never prepared for it. And there's nothing like experience. I don't care how much training you have. It's just that you can practice all day until you get out there and you throw the pitch in a ball game. There's nothing like experience. Compared to what the fellas are today, we were shit poor trained, excuse the expression. I mean, they're really trained today. I mean, we couldn't compare. Our training in those days couldn't compare to what they go through today. They're real pros today. We were just, I mean, let's face it. You were faced with a situation where they had to build up their forces and do it rapidly. And they did the best they can, I'm sure. But you're always learning something as you progress.
Did you sense that when you were going through it, or is this more looking back?
I didn't know enough to sense that when I was going through it until I was in combat. And then you realize that, well, maybe they should have done it this way. That's why they take a lot of guys when they come back out of combat and make them instructors to improve constantly. I'm sure the guys that followed me were better trained than me, and I was better trained than the guys that preceded me. Mm-hmm. So it's a constant method of improvement. But no, they weren't. We weren't. We had to learn as we went along.
I'm curious about you. The first person to really mention being mesmerized by flak, but I've also never thought to ask that about.
Yes, because the Germans, I don't know whether you think this or most people think this, is they aimed individual. They don't. The only exception to that is when they had a radar. But most of your big targets, they threw up what they call area barrage. They know, I'm sure people have told you this from other interviews, when you start on a mission, you hit what they call the IP, the initial point, and that's where you start your bomb run. When you get on that, you got to fly straight and level so that the bombardier actually takes over control of the plane. And the Germans know where you're going to fly, and they throw up every gun they just at your altitude. And they had radar. Well, it was a primitive form of radar in those days, but they would, and it would be called an area barrage, and you had to fly through it. And you look out there, and you wouldn't think you'd be able to get through it, but you do. I mean, I'm here, so you get through it. But you're, as far as being mesmerized by flak, that was in the initial stages. Yeah, but it was. I mean, I stood there and watched it like an idiot. I didn't. They told me it was going to happen, and I didn't believe them. I mean, I was a smart-ass kid in those days, and I didn't believe them. I thought I knew all the answers, and I didn't. I mean, I just stood there, and then all of a sudden, as I said, when that next plane got hit, then I tried to crawl into the helmet. That was all. I mean, it's expression of worth.
When did you? What was the first mission you encountered fighters, or did you encounter fighters on?
Yeah, we encountered a couple of fighters. We didn't have it as rough with fighters as the fellas that coming out of England.
And this is in 40, you were flying in
44, 45, and we didn't have it as rough as the guys coming out of England. We had, flak was our big problem until the jets came, the German jets.
So you encountered some...
I saw that flash go by, and they said it was a German jet, and we tried to hit it, but they were going so damn fast. I mean, but they weren't that frequent. But they did come through, and what they did is if you had a sloppy formation, they'd go right through the middle of it. Those guys were flying. I mean, they weren't experienced. Some of those pilots were experienced, the jet pilots, but the average fighter pilot, you could see the techniques going down because they were
even in your stay. You could.
Well, see, we engaged German fighters, but not to the degree the guys coming out of England, and I think that they probably had a lot more than we did.
What was your scariest mission? What was the hardest mission, and since the scariest, do you remember?
There's a few of them.
Or you could tell more than one, but
when you look out the window, your windmills are stopped. That's scary, and that's happened a few times. And you have to feather an engine or two, and the B-24s wasn't known for its ability to fly on two engines, but as I said, thank God we had an experienced pilot. And probably the scariest mission, or the mission you were concerned about, is when we went and bombed up in the Alps. We had to fly over the Alps because the Germans used to bring the guns up into the mountains. And we might be at 25,000 feet, but they'd be say 12,000 feet below you, and they take We would like there was one target, Linz, I think it was. They had a jet factory we were trying to get, and they would be almost firing this way instead of up this way, and that was you were very concerned about that because they would take a toll, and they were rough sometimes.
A lot of some of the I've had in terms of the people I've interviewed, I've had a range of experience. Some were in groups that lost only a handful of planes. Others saw the entire.
Well, that varied according to the target. Now, as I said, I know on one mission, in fact, my father had cut it out of paper before my mother saw it. I think there was we had 50% losses and things like that. And in other missions, you'd have a milk run. But as I said, we did not have it as rough as the 8th Air Force. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I ain't going to tell you any war stories. Those guys, they were rough.
How many when you originally landed in Italy and in your initial group, your squadron? How many planes did you like? Would you turn around and find on a given mission? How many might not return?
As I said, it varied. You couldn't set it. Sometimes you would fly a formation of. It all depends what kind of box formation you would fly. You would have maybe 9. Sometimes half of them wouldn't come back, or sometimes they'd all come back. Sometimes you lose 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. I can remember flying over Vienna. As I said, that was very heavily defended with flak guns, and I don't know why. I was at the waist for some reason. Maybe it was one of the earlier missions, but I was at the waist gun, and I was kidded about it my rest of my service career. I called out, "Here comes a 109 at 9 o'clock," and it was a damn B-24 that was hitting. And the silhouette, just at the time I saw it, was spinning in, mm-hmm. and it looked just like a fighter plane making a pursuit curve attack on us. So it varies. I couldn't say that give you an average, maybe 1, 2, 3 out of 9 or 10.
But that's still a pretty high loss.
Yeah. But I maybe I'm a little high. I don't know. As I said, it depends upon the target. Some targets, even the small targets, if you had hit a target, now I'm talking strictly flak because that was our biggest problem. If you hit a target that had German regulars at the flak guns, it was tough. They were good. If you hit a target, say you go over to Romania or someplace like that, or Yugoslavia, where they had some of the natives of the country there manning the guns, they weren't as good.
And you could really tell this difference.
Oh yeah, sure. You could tell. I mean, those Germans guys would be right on the money. And sometimes too, the Germans used to take captured aircraft and fly along parallel with you, and they'd call down your speed and your altitude. And we had I'll tell you a story. We had a CO. He was a little bit of Jonesy type. He came out to the crew next to us, and he said to the tail gunner, "Go back to your tent." Had tents those days, and he flew the mission as a tail gunner. He wanted to see what it was like. He wanted to make sure that he was very concerned with his guys. Another time, we were at a mission, and we went up to, I guess it was up around Germany somewhere. I don't know, Munich or something. I don't know. But anyway, as I said, the Germans did capture aircraft and fly them up there, and we see this P-51 sliding in toward the formation. What the hell? They weren't supposed to be there. Anyone that points their nose at you, you shoot. So we start shooting, and he got the hell out of there. And the next day, the guy that was briefing us, because we were flying a mission right next day, and he says, "Guys," he says, "if you see P-38, he says, make sure you identify." The CO almost had his ass shot off. He was that type of man. I tell you, he was a real good guy.
So I mean, the fact that he flew waist gunner, I mean, that's
tail gunner.
Tail gunner. I mean, in the Navy, I mean, officers. I mean, an officer wouldn't have. It's hard to imagine.
Navy's a different breed of captain.
Yeah, I mean,
you see, I don't know what it is like today in the Air Force, of course, but in those days, very informal. I mean, my pilot was a captain, but he was Pappy. You never called him Captain, Sir, or of course, maybe in a formal situation you might, but it was always nicknames. Everyone had a nickname. You'd go out. Well, I can remember, they had officers club in town, and they had enlisted me at the club. Well, Pappy used to take his bars off and go and enlist me and go drinking with us. He was that kind of a guy. So we were not formalized.
So in other words, you didn't have to deal with a lot of the sort of rigorous military
chickens.
Yeah.
No.
No, actually, we should say we had Paul Fussel's written a whole chapter on chicken shit.
Yeah.
You had very little of that.
Nah, the Air Force. We had very little of. One time I got chewed out. It was one of the few times over there. You walk around, and I was wearing a pair of moccasins, and I had a pair of flight coveralls on, and I had my old baseball cap from St. Peter's, because I played ball up there. And I'm walking with a pair. I was coming back from radio school. And I had a pair of earphones, and this staff car comes up there with the 2 or 3 star flag on it. And I saw, what the hell? We never bothered saluting any cars and everything else. And stopped and backed up. Guy in the back rolled the window down. He called me over and he said, "Son, what army are you in?" Christ, there's a goddamn 3-car stand. I said, "The American Army, sir." He says, "Well, act like it. You're not dressed like it. I thought maybe you were a damn German." He rolled up with Jimmy Doodle. You remember Jimmy? Have you heard of Jimmy Doodle? He was visiting his friend. I'm sure he had a big laugh, because the look on my face must have been ridiculous, because he scared the hell out of me. But that was the only type of... I'm sure he did it. Huh?
That was the only time you really ever encountered that kind.
One time my crew was flying, I don't know whether I was sick or got hurt or something. I didn't fly with them, and they had to make a forced landing at one of the adjacent airfields, and I went into the flight office, and I said to the guy, I said, "Hey, you got any Jeeps around or anything?" I don't know. And he said, "Look out there. If there's one out there," he said, "I don't care." It was a CO's Jeep. I swiped the CO's Jeep. Boy, did he wait for me when he come back. But he was a good guy. I mean, I said he chewed me out a little bit and said, "Get the hell out of here." He's a good guy. Because I went down to pick him up. That's what the object of the Jeep. But, he was a good guy.
And he apparently cared for you.
Yes, he did.
A lot of people have said they enlisted in the Navy and the Air Force partly because they wanted nice cots to sleep on and better food. Did you find that was the case?
Well, the food, I don't know, it was pretty good, but I'm sure it was better than the infantry fellows. And as far as the accommodations were concerned, we'd lived in tents for a while, but nothing like a foxhole. Christ, I mean, there's no comparison between the life that those guys went through, and no matter what war, the GIs or the grunts or whatever war you want to call them, they had the rough part, the rough living.
Did you sense that at the time?
Oh, sure.
That you really, compared to what they were, in terms of the creature comfort?
Oh, creature comfort, sure. You realize that at the time. I mean, we weren't that naive. I mean,
what about you were based in Italy in one base for most of the war?
I was in Africa a little bit, but that was just a ferry planes around. I didn't do any bombing in Africa.
How long were you in Africa?
About 3 weeks.
Oh, so you weren't there very?
No, thank God.
You didn't care for Africa?
No, not the part that I saw, anyway.
Where were you based?
Well, we went into Casablanca, then we went into Tunis. We were flying from the west coast of Africa over to I guess it would be the northeast coast or north coast, and we were ferrying a plane, and 6 of us took off. We got caught in a typhoon. I realized it. And they gave us, there was a typhoon coming, they gave us a recall, we didn't hear it. And our pilot, we got down on the deck and flew most of the way on the deck. 3 of the planes cracked up. We were the only one to get through, and the other guy got hurt. We didn't even hear a recall because of I don't know if anyone had mentioned St. Elmo's fire.
No.
Well, it's an atmospheric condition. You know what it is?
I've heard that term.
All right, what it is, in those days, of course, you had props, and it was electrical condition, and you could look out, and the airplane is completely lined with a blue light, and the props around the circumference of the props is all blue, and it knocks out all your, not physically destroying it, it just disrupts communication. It's a phenomenon of nature. I don't know what the correct name is for it, but it's called, we used to call St. Elmo's fire, and that's what happened. We didn't have any communication, and as I said, we had an experienced pilot, thank God, and we made it. But that was an experience. That was an experience. That was as scary as some of the missions, I'll tell you, because
it's interesting because typhoons for Navy people are really that for a lot of these guys from the Navy, say that's the scary.
Oh, sure.
Battle pale to.
Oh yeah, it scares the hell out of you because you're so helpless. That's the same thing when you go on a mission. Whereas probably flak is psychologically more scary than a fighter, because when you go on a mission and a flak comes up, there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. A fighter, you can at least shoot back, you release your tension. And the same thing, you can't do a damn thing about the typhoon or a hurricane, no matter what it is. You just have to sit there and take it. And that's a lousy feeling. That's like someone beating the hell out of you and you can't fight back. It's the same thing.
You often flew the lead. Your plane was often in the lead for mission. How was there ever that urge to release bombs early? I mean, I always wondered that about people.
There's always the urge, but we've never did it.
Really?
There are. Hey, listen, when you see that damn stuff coming up, or the fighters didn't come after you over the target because the flak would be coming and they'd break off. But you see all that damn flak coming up. So let's get the hell out of here, But we did.
Really, by and large, that.
Oh, of course, I didn't have a bombardier would be but he'd often say, oh, geez, I wish we could have got the hell out of there early, because you come up, you can't do anything about it. You just got to go on that bomb run.
During the war, how much of a sense did you know of how well your missions were? I mean, what?
During the war, we thought we were the greatest thing to come down the pike. Of course, later results weren't as favorable as we thought. But we thought we did a hell of a good job, and we thought we demolished targets. Then you only learn you have to go back and hit them again. But we weren't. They used to have the old saying that you could drop a bomb in a pickle barrel. Well, that was a lot of crap. I mean, that's,
when did you learn that? Was it only after the war that you learned that the bombing was not as
effective? Yes, it was after the war. Yeah.
But at the time in the war, you thought this was very.
We thought we did pretty well.
Did it ever disappoint you that it wasn't as?
Sure. Oh yeah. Oh, I'll amend that statement. You didn't do well when you had to go back and hit it a second time.
Yeah. So that was your insight.
That was it. But on a whole, we thought that the bombing was a lot more effective than it proved out to be. And sometimes the guys would toggle late on the leader, and they spread the bombs from hell and breakfast all over. But we thought we did fairly well, but after the war we learned that we weren't as effective as we thought we were.
What did you, in a sense, you're in a strange world, even more than the Navy, because you're in 1 minute you're in combat and you're in plane, but the next minute you're back on base. And
that's right.
Or someone said, one pilot said, you're reading about the war.
Oh yeah.
Was it ever hard to go between these two different?
You have to crank yourself up again. I mean, after you get progress, it gets hard to crank yourself up again, especially if you're going on a rough one. You know it's going to be rough. You'd have to get cranked up again. But you used to. Then when you start feeling sorry for yourself, you just say, "Thank God I don't have a rifle in the foxhole."
So that became one of the measures of.
Oh yeah. Because especially in Italy, those guys in Italy, they had to go climbing those damn mountains with the mules and the rain and the mud, and the other guys had it just as rough, but it just would affected us more. We knew that the guys would die. You take around the Enzio, for Christ's sake. I mean, those guys, Christ, they were there going up that hill trying to take Enzio how many times, and it'd rain and it'd be muddy, and if you start feeling sorry for yourself, you think of those guys. Or the guys were hitting down there, landing an invasion up there at Anzio. So you'd pull you back down to earth a little bit.
Did you ever wonder whether that your bombs were hitting military targets? Did you ever worry that you were bombing civilians? Or did it even cross your mind?
Pardon?
Or did it even cross your mind?
No, it crossed my mind, but it wasn't an ultimate concern, really, because one of the reasons, this is my own personal viewpoint, I can't speak for anyone else, but one of the fellows I was in training with flew out of Italy, and we were corresponding. There was a couple of guys that I knew that were in the same outfit. He got shot down over Germany, and one of his crewmen, when they landed, was civilians stuck a pitchfork in him, and Jonesy, not Jonesy, Curly Owens. When he was coming down, they were shooting at him, and he was coming down his parachute. I figured that they're at war, and it's just something that you got to put up with. But that sort of soured me on feeling any sorrow.
How worried were you about being shot down and then?
Oh, sure, you're concerned. I mean, when you get ready for a mission, they brief you, they give you a script, they give you maps for the underground. You had to make sure you destroyed them, and
so you were given some survival materials and stuff.
Oh, sure. You for example, they used to tell you that this certain priest in this certain church in Munich was part of the underground. He'd hide you in his cell. You know, guys that can't come back.
Really? How many made it that?
Well, there was a few of them. I mean, it wasn't a great number, but
yeah.
I can't tell you the exact number or anything. But they did give you who to contact, and they brief you in that respect.
Well, it's interesting because I've interviewed some people, I think, in the 8th Air Force who didn't get any of that. They really didn't.
Well, as I said, I couldn't speak for them, but they did have. They did have.
So you had a sense that they were even looking after you, even if you were to get shot down, that they wanted you to get back if you could.
Oh yeah. I had that sense. I don't know whether it was wrong or not.
Did you carry a weapon on you?
Yes. 45. Carried in the shoulder also. Carried a 45, and then you also had a hunting knife strapped to your parachute. Because when you bail out, you get hung up in a tree and cut your risers. They were the two weapons you had. I don't know whether I'd take on the German army or not. On a 45. But, I mean, I qualified as expert on a 45, but Christ, if the guy's more than 10 feet away, it might not even hit him. That thing bucked like anything. And they weren't too accurate. I mean, the slide used to wobble. They weren't accurized, but we did carry it, more for effect, I think, or ease of conscience.
I wanted to ask a question. Did you? I mean, you were in 44, 45. Did you ever have anything to do with bailing out the armies in the Bulge, by any chance?
Yes.
Oh, you did. Okay, because remember the weather.
That was one of the reasons we came back from. Remember I mentioned the Isle of Capri?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you,
Battle of the Bulge. Actually, I don't know this. From what I read, there was actually two battles in the Bulge. The one that's the most publicized, and then there was one in the southern part of France. And they lost. I understand they lost more men down there in that southern part than the ones up there. One of your celebrated alumnus from Rutgers here. Good football. Vinny Utz.
Oh yeah.
Lost an arm in the Battle of the Bulge.
Everyone in class of 42 has a story about Vinny Utz.
He was a character. I didn't know him. I mean, he was one of the guys that, of course, preceded me. But I knew it because I was a kid. I used to go and watch him play football. And he lost an arm.
Did your number of missions you need to get out go up as you were there? How many?
Yeah.
What was the initial target?
I think it was 30. I'm not sure of that. I think it was 30.
And then
a lot of times you sign over to stay with the guys. Now, when we came back from overseas, we all signed up to go to the Pacific as a unit.
Really?
And we did some flight testing while we're waiting to get a B-29, and they dropped the atomic bomb.
How much of a shock was it that the bomb was dropped? I mean, how?
Well, we didn't know what the hell it was. I mean, today, everyone knows what an atomic bomb is, but you've got to imagine that we equated destruction or the power of the bombs with what we used. And to realize, really know what destructive power the atomic bomb was pretty hard to comprehend until quite a bit after the fact. But I know we were all very happy that they did drop it because we knew we weren't going to go over to get shot at again in the Pacific.
Could you all went over to Japan? Could any of the crew have gotten out at that point?
Yes, yeah, oh sure, yeah. In fact, I was an instructor for the Chinese Air Force after, and I went back to Colorado at Pueblo, the same base I left from, and they had some of the Chinese nationalist Air Force when they were training in bombing crews, and that's what I wound up doing until I got discharged.